All right, perfect.
No, that's great. Thank you so much.
Record. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Double Digit Hockey Show on ASTV Production. Thank you so much for joining me again here on the show. Got a great one lined up today. I'm going to complete the Rod Pederson show trifecta. We've had Rod himself, we've had Mr. DuPont on, and now we get the man behind it all, producer Clark. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Johnny.
No, thanks for making time for us today. Really appreciate you joining me on the show today. Gotta ask though, starting off right at the top, what is it like to work with a Canadian sports media icon like Rod Pederson?
It's great. You know, I've known Rod for a few years now, kind of off, not even just professionally, but just, through different events and some other things. I used to work for the Regina Pats, so he would broadcast his show at the rink lots of days. So you'd see him all the time. We would chat kind of off and on just as I walked by his desk. And so it was actually a really natural transition because he knew kind of where I was coming from. I knew obviously where he was coming from. And Darren was in the mix as well. So I got to meet Darren just before we started the show, about a month and a half before we started the show. And we all clicked pretty good. I feel like it's a pretty good trio. All of our pre-show meetings are usually pretty interesting, but we're usually all on the same page with everything. And it's been great. Rod is a very interesting guy to work with, I should say. And I think, he makes my job a lot easier because I can throw pretty much anything at him, and he's handled it before. He's done it before. He's talked to people in certain places before. He can pretty much talk to anybody. So he's a producer's dream for what I do with guest booking and making sure the show make sure the show happens smoothly. I can basically just throw anything at him and he can handle it. So it's a really good combo, and I think it's a winning combination of people. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's been there, done that, and it's quite amazing to watch how his show comes every week. Now he's off this week on the show. What's like with Mr. Darren behind the mic there for you?
Yeah. Darren's been filling. We only had the one show so far, but he's filling in this week. Rod's away doing some recovery training, which is his other profession, of course. He's a life and recovery coach. So Darren's jumping in, and we're doing a couple extra interviews. I'm trying to cater towards his likes and needs because obviously he's a Tennessee Titans fan. So today we had a Tennessee Titans reporter from ESPN join us. We're talking a little bit of Leafs, but it's a great week overall because, the NHL playoffs are so hot and heavy right now, and there's so much to talk about. There's a wealth of topics. So it's a great week for him to be doing this because there's always going to be something to talk about. And we have guests coming on from across Canada analyzing the NHL playoffs, and a few from down in the States. We have tomorrow, actually on Tuesday, we have the Carolina Hurricanes public address announcer joining us. So we're mixing it up a little bit, and we're just having a lot of fun with it. And again, it's a great week for him to be doing it, and he's done it before. So it's never a bad time when Darren hosts because he can handle it too. He's got just as much acumen, I feel like, sometimes as Rod. And because technically it is Darren's show. I mean, he owns it. So I think he knows the vision of the show so well that it's an easy transition to go from one to the other.
Yeah, listeners and viewers of my show would know that quite well themselves, having him on a few weeks. So, all right, enough about those two because we know who the real brains behind the operation is. So let's focus on you a little bit here. Why sports media for you? What got you going on this path and wanting to be in sports media?
Yeah, sure. So originally it wasn't that. I came out of high school. I played baseball down in California at a junior college for a year. So for me, coming out of high school, I was pretty sports focused. Everything for me was that. And I was one of those, I wouldn't call myself a dumb jock, but I was getting there where, it was kind of just like sports were everything for me. It's all I talked about. It's all I watched. It's all I cared about. So I went down to California. I decided it wasn't kind of working out for me. Came back to Regina, and I didn't really know what to do because, again, everything was just so sports focused for so long in my life. And I went to the U of R, and I was looking around at some of their courses, and sport and recreation management was one that popped out for me in the kinesiology department. And it seemed like it was kind of a business degree mixed with sports stuff, mixed with, community engagement and community planning, stuff like that. So I jumped right into that right away, and I met some great people in that program, many of which are having very successful careers themselves. One guy works in the CFL that I went to class with. One guy works for Saskatchewan hockey. One guy works for Sask football. I know a bunch of girls who got into, like, I think Ringette, Saskatchewan. Like, a lot of the classmates that I went to school with are like running organizations here in the province. So it was a pretty good group of people, and you made a lot of great connections. But I actually started out my career in the SJHL with the Estevan Bruins. I was their marketing and operations director. So my job was to basically keep the team afloat money-wise, make people enjoy going to games, and all the community engagement you could ask for. So getting the players to agree to go to school outings and different community events. So that was how that started out. It morphed into going into the Regina Pats, which is my hometown, where my wife is from. So we came back home, and I worked with them as the director of game day operations for 3 seasons, including the Memorial Cup season. So that was awesome, and it was a wild ride with that. But after that, after the Memorial Cup, things kind of slowed down in the junior hockey world, and they were making some cuts, unfortunately, and I was one of them. So it naturally actually happened really, really nicely, because I got so in touch with the production staff that did all the Pats games. The production staff was starting up this thing called the Rod Pederson Show, and they needed a producer for it. And I just happened to be a free agent. So it worked out really well. I got to meet Darren. Like I said, I've met Darren a couple of times before that, but never like a really one-on-one talk. And Paul, my boss, who works at IKS Media, that's who I work for now, he's like, hey, come meet with Darren and just chat. We have this new project going on. And he's really interested in it. We need a producer. Go chat with Darren for like a good half an hour interview or something. I'm like, sure. I think me and Darren spoke for like 4 hours. Like I came to his office, and we just talked all afternoon. It just kind of clicked right away. We had the same kind of mindset on what the show was going to be, and what it could look like. And so it just kind of worked right away. And then we met with Rod shortly after that. And since I knew Rod, it was like, oh yeah, I know him. We're all good to go. So it just kind of all morphed into that. And so when you asked, I guess the original question was why sports media? It kind of just happened naturally. I didn't even really focus on it. It wasn't a focus of mine. I was more on the business side of things. And then it kind of just, as I got more involved with this game day production with the Pats, it got me more ingrained in what sports media was. And here I am now 2 years after that. And we're 2 years into the show, 486 episodes into the Rod Pederson Show. And now I'm talking to you. So this has been great. It's been a great ride.
What a journey. That's phenomenal. There's a few things in there I didn't know. So that was awesome. Didn't know you worked in the SJHL. How was that experience for you? I have to know now.
Oh, it was great. Luckily, I've been able to, I've kind of lucked into a couple situations. And in Estevan, it was really great because it's one of the bigger markets in the SJHL in terms of business in the community. It's obviously a major oil town in the province. So it was a very generously and very prideful town in terms of supporting everything going on in the town. So the Bruins job for me was awesome. I got to basically dive right into sales. I had never done it before. So I was selling sponsorships like crazy. I had never operated a live event, so I got to do that. I got to plan fundraising events. I got to meet a lot of people around the city. I got to do a little bit of radio work too, which maybe is where it all started for me, looking back. But I got to be a color commentator on the road games for the team, so that was fun. And nice. Yeah, it was a really great market, and just the SJHL is such a great place to start for so many people coming out of university or in that age area, because you basically get to learn by fire. You have to do everything. It's all on your shoulders. Because for us, and I'm going to assume it's for almost every junior A team out there, it's the coach and one person to do everything else. And as much as our coach was very supportive and very helpful, Chris Lugood at the time, he had to run a hockey team, so I had to handle everything off the ice for the most part, and it was a great learning experience, and I would recommend it for anybody trying to get into any type of sports industry, is to go work in junior A hockey, because man, if you don't learn by the if you don't learn quick enough and you don't gain enough experience, or you're not able to do stuff, you won't last. So if you're gonna make it in the industry, go work for a junior A team, and if you can handle that, you can pretty much do anything, in my opinion. But yeah, no, it was a great way to start off my career. We moved down there as a family. My wife and I had a daughter at the time, just one at the time. So we made some friends. We learned a lot, and it really helped us get into that Regina Pats role as well.
It's awesome. I always like to bring light to the SJHL or the AJHL, those different leagues, because when you talk about junior hockey, a lot of people automatically go to the WHL, OHLs, and they don't talk about these other leagues. So outstanding. Had to ask you about that for sure. So your role with the Rod Pederson show, producer, you enjoy that there. And then there's kind of a spin-off baby of that show, the Squadcast. Tell me about the Squadcast, how that came about, and what your hopes are for it, and why you enjoy that so much.
Yeah, sure. So that one's funny. Obviously, we've again done 486 episodes of Rod's show, and being the producer of that, I feel like I've learned a lot about how to maneuver a show just from listening to Rod so much, and I've made a ton of connections in terms of guests, analysts from different sports around North America, really. And it was a conversation one day that, Max Ritz is my co-host, and he was actually an intern last summer for, I think, an 8-week or 10-week program or something that he was doing. And, he just came in, he's a younger guy, mid-20s, and he would just come in, and in the afternoons we would just chat, and it just turned into us talking about different sports topics, different debates that we were having. And Max one day was just like, we could have a show with all the stuff we debate every single day. Might as well put a camera on. And I was like, that'd be hilarious. And then that morphed into him kind of getting this idea in his head that this would actually work. And he kept kind of pushing me and prodding me to do it. And I kept telling him I didn't have enough time. And in reality, I probably don't. But but he kept pushing me, and it turned into this really good idea that we thought at the time was a good idea. And we reached out to a couple of sponsors and got a little bit of support with it, including our studio here, which is a major help. Obviously, they're a big sponsor of ours. And that kind of just, he kind of pushed me over the edge. I'm like, you know what? Why not? I love talking sports. I've been doing it my whole life. Max is a really good co-host. He's very knowledgeable about a lot of things. So I thought, if we can combine that, we have our director, Jordan, who needs a little extra time for some hours. So I was like, that would make sense for him. We can pay him. So that worked out. So there was, it just it turned into, from what just was afternoon debates, turned into, a thing we just kind of hit the ground running with. And it's a weekly show, so it's not too stressful. We've been able to get some great guests, and I steal a lot from the Rod Pederson show, obviously, which is kind of the idea. Originally, the plan was to just be basically a post show for Rod's show. So what our original plan is that we were going to take what Rod talked about for the last week and kind of analyze that. And it turned into us just being like, well, why don't we just do our own thing? So we kind of just started our own thing and made it our own thing. And now we're 33 episodes in, I think. And we're just loving it. So it's been a blast, and it's been so much fun to kind of get my own outlet, I guess, after being behind the wall here. This is our studio here for Rod's show. So right behind this wall is where I usually sit. So to get out from behind the wall it's been pretty nice, and it's allowed me to kind of grow as a producer as well, just learning so much on the go.
That's all how one idea can become such a great project. My wife didn't think that me having this idea for my show was a great project because it takes a lot of my time away from her and our kids, but it's fun in the end of the day, and that's what it's all about. Really awesome. So Squadcast, that's a weekly show. You guys do that on Facebook as well, on the Facebook Live, just like the Rod Pederson show does. How do you find that going for you?
It's great. We really do love the Facebook platform for everything that we do in this studio. We've done a lot of stuff outside of Rod's show using Facebook as well. Rod has his recovery hour show as well that we do on Facebook, which is his addictions and alcoholics. Basically, it's the recovery show that he does. So we do that every month. And there's a ton of other stuff going on. There's actually a major project that Nick Lewis is working on, since you're in Alberta, you know who Nick Lewis is. So he's working on this major project. It's called AO Sports, and it's going to be a North American-wide sports content platform. And it's going to be, if everything goes the way it sounds, it's going to be game-changing for a lot of people. So that's going to be very cool. So just using the Facebook platform is great because, everybody pretty much has Facebook. It's very interactive, so you're able to get on there and really kind of chime in. And we use our viewers and our commenters kind of as a way to drive topics in the show and react to certain things that are happening. So it's a great platform for that. It's really easy to reach a far distance and connect with a lot of people. I've gotten a lot of guests from Facebook, just adding random people, and it's been really great. It eventually morphed us into using YouTube as well. And now Rod's show specifically is on Game Plus television as well. So that's been great to be on an actual TV network and be on, national TV across North America. So that's been great as well. But it all started on Facebook, and we never forget that. And it's still a great platform to use and just so interactive and easy to use. So it's been really good.
Awesome. That's awesome. I enjoy watching the squad. I get a few minutes on my Saturdays as well. The kids running around, so it's awesome. Okay, let's jump to it. Why we actually brought you on here was to talk a little bit about you, but I wanted to get your thoughts and your feelings of what we've seen and what we're about to see in the NHL playoffs. Of course, regular season's wrapped up, except if you're Calgary and Vancouver. They got a couple games left to go here. But what have you made just overall of the North Division in the NHL this year?
Yeah, let's be honest. That Calgary-Vancouver series is the real series that's happening right now. Like the other ones in the actual playoffs, they can go away. I'm more interested in these last three games.
Hey, that was a good game last night.
Yeah. So you know what? This NHL playoffs I think it's going to be just amazing. I think all the matchups that are lining up seem to be really intriguing, and there's a lot of storylines. But you mentioned the North specifically. It's funny, Johnny, there's a lot of people that said the North was really weak for most of the year. You probably saw it on Twitter or analysts on TV saying, the North is a weaker division. That's why Connor McDavid has so many points, or that's why Austin Matthews has so many goals, or whatever the argument was. To me, I thought it was the opposite. I saw I thought the West and the Central divisions as a bit of as weaker divisions in the North. That was just me, but to me, like before the season started, on the Squadcast a couple of times, I said, I think 6 of these Canadian teams, if it was a regular normal season and they were all in their normal divisions, I thought 6 of the teams could have been playoff teams. And that includes Vancouver and Calgary, who just struggled. But the hard part about that, and, this is no secret, but out of the 7 teams, 3 teams had to miss the playoffs. That's just how it works. There was no other way to go about it. There was going to be 3 of the teams that were going to miss the playoffs in the North. And because of that, 3 teams had to have losing records. And that's just it just happened to be the Flames and the Canucks being 2 of them. The Senators are an interesting team because they struggled so hard off the beginning, but got so hot at the end. So that's just pushing their momentum into next year. But, again, I could have told you if the Canucks, the Flames, and the Oilers were all in the Pacific like they normally are, I could have seen a scenario where all 3 of them make the playoffs, especially with how bad the California teams are right now and the other teams in that division. I feel like they would have been in a pretty good spot. But when you're only playing teams within your division, things can landslide pretty fast, and that's what we saw, especially with Calgary. They were sitting okay for most of the season, and then it just fell. And it was just so hard because once that starts and you're playing the same teams all the time, it's kind of hard to get out of that. You don't get to see another team that you haven't seen before, or you don't get to take any nights off because every game is a 4-point game, and it can get pretty mentally stressful very fast. And I think it just kind of hit Calgary harder than most of the other teams. And it just they couldn't get out of the funk. And you could tell, some games just didn't look like they were there. And Vancouver, with Vancouver, it's tough because with their contract situation coming into this year, they lost a couple of important pieces with Tyler Toffoli and him being the main one, obviously going to Montreal and having a very good year. But they had to shift a few different pieces around. And I don't think they were able to gel fast enough off the beginning of the season. They had some very rough injury stuff going on with especially Peterson later in the year, getting hurt. And the myriad of injuries that they had to deal with, plus the COVID thing. Nothing went like they were cursed. It seemed like they were almost cursed this year. And I had them in my preseason predictions. I had them finishing first in the division. Like that's how crazy this division was. If you look at any, and you were probably one of them, but if you look at anybody across Canada before the season who made a preseason predictions list, I don't think you would have found two that were the same. Like there was so many different variations of how this division could have worked. And it just so happened that Vancouver had a cursed year and the Flames got in a major funk and it just kind of pushed them out of it. But I mean, look at how Winnipeg finished the season and look at how Montreal kind of finished the season after the trade deadline. They weren't doing so great either. So, I mean, I just think this division was so competitive the entire year that I think it drained a lot of these teams at certain points and it hit teams at different times. But that's just how this year in the NHL is. I think if you look at any division, any of the other three, I think they all probably showed signs of this, but we're just so hyper focused up in Canada on the North Division that's what we're talking about every day. But I love it personally. It's not going to last. Just it can't. But I think this is just a historic year for Canadian hockey fans to at least enjoy this one-off type of year.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It was fun for one season for sure. Absolutely enjoyed the competitiveness and the rivalries that were made, and then we have to play the Senators again type of attitudes that we saw across a few teams there. Let's Ottawa though, and I want to kind of do a little bit of a deeper look at Ottawa. No one predicted them. There was a few that were trying to be hot takey and say they'll finish fifth or something in the division, but for the most part, everyone knew what Ottawa was and where they were going to fish. Yet they didn't. Yet they surprised us still with their work ethic. What did you make of Ottawa specifically in the run this season?
Well, I got to see them several times. Obviously, as a Toronto Maple Leafs fan myself, we got to play them. I think it was 10 times. I think they were one of our 10s this year. So I got to see them a lot, and I saw a few other games with them involved too. And they remind me a lot, Johnny, of the Maple Leafs from 2016-17 when Austin Matthews was just coming in. Mitch Marner was just kind of starting out. William Nylander was still technically a rookie. And they were this very quick, exciting team. They were offensive focused. They didn't play a ton of defense, so that made their games really fun to watch because you never knew what was going to happen. And they had a couple of vets that were kind of journeymen, but they were still trying to kind of carve out the rest of their careers. And lots of them are still playing in the leagues in some way. Like Leo Komarov, for example, Matt Martins was on that team. And Nikita Zaitsev, I think, was just starting out. So the parallels to that were, the Senators this year, they have so much young, inexperienced talent, along with a couple of gritty vets like, Derek Stepan, who unfortunately got hurt, guys like that. And then kind of a rough shot, makeshift defensive group that kind of worked okay. And then who knew what was going to happen in goal every night? It was just kind of a guessing game, especially when Edmonton came to town, because those were rough. But the Senators, to me, were always a team that coached by DJ Smith, a former Maple Leafs coach, who just never seemed like they were going to give you an easy night. There was obviously a couple of those odd nights that they got blown out, but they never really gave you an easy night. And they always seemed like they were skating with you the whole time. They were kind of pesky out there. The old pesky Sens were back. And that just it shows a lot as to what they're going to be over the next couple of years. If they can continue that mentality, but also continue to grow and develop that young talent that they have there, I really do like how the Senators are setting themselves up. And I think we could be looking at a team that's a top 3 perennial team in the Atlantic Division, potentially for several years, if they continue to go down this path. So I really like the Senators this year. I know they got off to a weird start, but look how they finished. And they just made everything a lot more interesting at the end.
Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a team in the North Division that worked harder than the Ottawa Senators. The bump that I saw in them was, could they get Waves? Now, just a little bit of a forecast. If you were looking in the future, do you think they have the goaltending it takes to be in that top 3 like you predict them to be?
I think so. The weird thing about Matt Murray is that he started off so hot, and now nobody's quite sure who he is anymore. So I wouldn't write him off yet. I mean, he's not even 27 yet. And if you think about the typical path of a goaltender, they usually don't start until they're 27, being really good. It just so happened that Matt Murray somehow got off to a hot start when he was like 21, won 2 cups, had a couple good years after that. And then for some reason, something's going on with him now. But they do have Philip Gustafson coming up as well, who I think a lot of Senators fans will tell you he's probably the starter of the future. And I think they have a couple other guys. You might see him a lot, but they have Mads Søgaard, who's a Medicine Hat Tiger. So he's coming up. And they have a couple other guys like that. Joey Decord, who's there. It sounds like they're letting go of their Swedish goalie that they have, who had a couple of rough games, Hogberg. It sounds like they're letting him go. But Hogberg. They do have, I want to say they have, 4 pretty nice goalies in their system right now. And you can always sign another one. So I wouldn't be worried too much about their goaltending, because I still have this weird belief that Matt Murray's going to be okay. And he's got a long contract to figure it out there. So I'm not writing him off quite yet, but I think they have a couple guys who could come up and maybe take his spot before too long, too.
Being a Leopards guy, I've seen a lot of Matt Søgaard, so I know exactly who you're talking about and what he brings to the table. And I don't think you're far off your assessment there for what he can bring to the table in a few seasons for the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, I don't think he's anywhere. I think he's going to take a while, but with his size and athletic ability, I think he has a chance to be a guy who pushes for a spot in a couple of years. He needs a little bit of seasoning, but I think once he gets there, I think he could do it. I think he's got the ability.
Yeah, he burned the Hurricanes a few times while I was watching those games and covering those games. So I have no doubts in his ability as a goaltender, or why he was drafted for sure. Let's stay out east. I'm going to give you a chance here to talk about your Maple Leafs. You love your team. I see it all the time on social media as I follow you. You have what a lot of people are going to call the dream matchup for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's versus the Montreal Canadiens in round 1. I'm just going to step back and let you go ahead here. Montreal, Toronto, does it get better for you?
No, there was a really small part of me that was hoping that we would have played Winnipeg in the first round, so that the potential second round matchup could have been Toronto, Montreal, because I think that would have been even better. But to play them, this is what we've wanted for so long, and it just never worked out. Either Montreal was good and we were terrible, or we were good enough and Montreal was either, we just never worked out. The matchups never worked out, especially in the 1 versus 8 years compared to the division years. But I think it's great. It's great for the rivalry, because I think a lot of Leafs and Habs fans would probably tell you that the rivalry is just not the same as it used to be. It's definitely tempered down from what it was. I'm going to say late 90s, early 2000s during the Darcy Tucker era. So it's definitely different. But it's still the historic. It's still that traditional one that everyone talks about. And originals, anytime you get an original 6 matchup, it's just great. And the way these teams have played this year specifically, like you said, I feel like it's a good matchup for the Leafs. Now, I hope I'm not going to regret saying that in a couple of weeks, but they have played them very well. They're 7-2-1 against them during the season. Carey Price, you don't know where he's at health-wise. And I feel like the skill of the Leafs forwards has been able to outpace the defensive style of the Habs for most of the season. But that could always change. They got a lot of guys coming back in Montreal. Their forward group is deep. I really do like their forward group from 1 to 12. And they've got a couple extra guys this year too. So I really do like what Montreal has. And I think it's not going to be an easy matchup. But I just feel like the Leafs do match up well against them. And I can see them finally breaking the, whatever you want to call it, curse, and finally getting passed around. And it's funny because a lot of people are asking me because they know who I am. They know I'm a Leafs fan, is what I'm trying to say. And they're like, "Oh, what do you honestly think? What do you honestly think that the Leafs could do this year? Like, how honestly? Tell me honestly." And I'm like, honestly, I have no idea. Like, I want to be confident in this team. I feel like I feel like this is the year that you can feel confident. But what has given you any confidence as a Leafs fan for 15, 16 years? I don't know. Like, so there's that part of me that's like, God, like they're good. They're good. You have to feel comfortable, but I don't. So until they actually win it, I'm not sitting down. I'm not gonna, rest on any laurels. I'm on the edge of my seat until it actually happens. And once it does, I feel like there's going to be this massive sigh of relief across the entire Leafs fan base. That it's just, we got one. Now what happens? Like what happens in round 2? I don't know. So it's going to be interesting, but it's definitely been a fun year. It's been frustrating at times. I think any team across Canada will tell you that this year has had its times of frustrations with, like you said, playing the same teams or going through stretches where, the Leafs had 3 or 4 stretches where they would lose 3 or 4 in a row, and it seemed like nothing was going right and the sky was falling. And then they would win 5 or 6 games in a row. So at no point in this year have I thought that the Leafs are done. They're not at their peak yet. I still feel like they're growing as a team, but it's definitely been the best team that I've seen probably at least 10 plus years of this Toronto Maple Leafs team. So I'm trying to let myself feel confident, but it's really hard to do that.
The trepidation does not go unnoticed across the Leafs fan base one bit. And you take that one step further, and you're lucky I'm talking Leafs on my show, by the way. I don't normally talk Leafs here. But anyways,
topics, I'll go wherever
the questions do I got to ask about the Leafs because there is some trepidation on this background Maple Leafs, and I mean in goal. Is it going to be Frederick Anderson? Is it going to be Jack Campbell, or is it going to be the dark horse David Riddick? How do you see this goaltending picture shaping up for the Leafs, and can it be enough to steal a game or 2 against Montreal for them?
Yeah, so it did come out. Sheldon Keefe came out, I think it was yesterday morning, and did say that Jack Campbell was confirmed to be the number 1 starter for game 1. So game 1, Jack Campbell is going to be the guy. And there's no reason he shouldn't be. I mean, he's put up great numbers this year. He has won like 93% of his games. So, I mean, that's not bad. And I feel like he's a guy that I think the team wants to win for. Everyone loves the guy. He's like the nicest dude on the planet. So it's like, it's hard not to want to play for the guy. But the way I'm looking at it is I think this is very comparable to how the 2018 Washington Capitals in a couple of ways. One, the Capitals hadn't been able to do it. And then that year it worked. It just happened for them. They won a couple of rounds. They beat Pittsburgh, which, slayed the dragon, sort of, so to speak. Which I kind of have this feeling that I kind of want the Leafs to play Boston, because I kind of think if they're going to ever do it, they've got to beat Boston in order for it to happen. But I'm also super scared of that possibility. So we'll see how that goes. But Washington, they were the team coming into that playoff stretch. They were the team that could never do it. And everyone wrote them off every year because Washington can't win in the playoffs. Ovechkin's not a playoff guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of parallels from that Washington team to this Leafs team in that I think the Leafs are a younger version of what that team was, but they also have the exact same goaltending situation going on right now with Jack Campbell kind of coming in and stealing the starting role like Philip Grubauer did that year for the Capitals. And Freddie Anderson's kind of like, hey, I was the starter for the last 4 years, kind of like Braden Holtby was that year. And what happened was Grubauer struggled, and they flipped the switch and put Holtby in. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen, because that means Jack Campbell's doing well and they don't have to worry about it. But if it does, I think they have a guy in Freddie Anderson who needs to prove something, and he's been able to do it in the past. So I'm hoping he can put whatever is going on in his mind behind him and become what they need if that ever comes to it. But for myself personally, I hope we don't see Freddie Anderson at all, because it means Jack Campbell's doing well and we just roll with it. But we'll see. And again, same thing with David Riddick. I hope he doesn't touch the ice either, because that means that two things have gone wrong. So that's kind of where I'm at.
That's a really good comparison. A really good thought there. That's didn't think of it that way. That's good comparison there. Okay, I need you to take your Leafs bias out of this next one.
Okay.
Is there a chance the Toronto Maple Leafs get catched?
Sorry, say that again. Your audio cut out for a second.
No, I'm just wondering, as a sports guy, what are the chances you think the Maple Leafs have of getting Carey Priced?
Of getting Carey Price or beating Carey Price?
Of Price taking that, like he did with against Pittsburgh last year, just taking over that series and just taking his team through.
Getting Carey Price. Okay, yeah. I think it's a very high possibility. I mean, I was talking with somebody the other day, and it's like, it's still Carey Price. So there's a decent chance he is going to come in and have like a 975 save percentage, have like 2 or 3 shutouts, and we just get goalied like hard. And so the one thing that's keeping me from that is that I know the Leafs have played Carey Price really well this year, and they've been able to kind of figure out what's going on with him, and they've beat him a few times this year. But as soon as those playoff lights come on, it's still going to be Carey Price in the playoffs, and you just simply never know. So that's a very strong thought in my head, is that that's going to happen again. But we'll see. I mean, we're going to find out a lot on Thursday night. I think Thursday is going to tell kind of the tale of the rest of the series. If it's going to be a 1-0 game like Minnesota and Vegas the other night, and it turns into a 1-0 goalie duel, then I think we're in for a ride with Carey Price. But if it's going to be like the Lightning and Panthers, and it's a bit of a physical game and stuff gets a little out of hand, and it's a 5-4 type of game, then I think the Leafs have a bit of the advantage. And I think that's going to set the tempo for the rest of the series. I really do. Game 1, they haven't played for about a week. Neither team will have played in about 6 or 7 days. So I think it's going to be all out, balls to the wall. And we're going to tell a lot for kind of the tone of the whole series, I think, on Thursday night in Game 1. And I'll have a better answer for you then, I think.
Last one on Leafs for this conversation here. It's hard to kind of call it a breakout postseason for him, but is this the breakout of Austin Matthews in the postseason for you?
Oh, I hope so. He has played pretty well in the playoffs individually, but I think this year he's been able to show that he's much more of a team driver than he has been in years past. And when I say that, I mean emotionally, leadership wise, defensively, he's played quite well. And if you look at his numbers, there's some advanced stats out there that show that his defensive game has improved a lot this year. I'm not a big advanced stats guy, so I don't even know what the stat is called, but I've seen a few charts from different places on different stats. And, it has shown a major improvement in his game, that he has developed more of a two-way game. So I think he's definitely primed to be that superstar player and kind of the guy who can win a series. Him and Mitch Marner, obviously, Mitch Marner led the team in points. It wasn't Austin. I know that Austin obviously is the Rocket Richard winner this year, but Mitch Marner still led the team in points and I think finished in 3rd in the league. So he's a very important part of what Austin Matthews is. And I think if they can I think Zach Hyman's probably going to get back on that line. And he's another guy who just, he's such an aggressive guy out there, and he lets Austin do so much just by clearing space or going and getting a puck for him and getting it to him. And he can finish in the dirty areas as well. So I think that line, if Hyman is back with them, it's just such a nice balanced line, and they all work together so well. They've been playing together for like 5 or 6 years now. If you include some of the Marlies times, for Hyman, I don't think Matthews ever touched the Marlies, and I don't think Marner did either, but they've been playing together for a long time. And I think with the balance of the rest of the lineup too, it's going to allow them to be offensively minded for the most part, because Johnny Tavares's line has been playing some defensive minutes. You see that Riley Nash is coming in with Nick Foligno potentially, and Alex Kerfoot or Wayne Simmons. They have a lot of flexibility throughout the lineup. But I believe that the other 3 lines are going to allow Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews to just go out there and give her offensively. And you could see a potential series, I think, where he might have 5, 6, 7, 8 goals in a 5, 6, 7 game series. So he's definitely that type of player now, and the Leafs need him to be, especially with the power play struggles that they've been having. They need to figure that out too. I worry about that a little bit, but I think with all the firepower, they've got to be able to figure it out, right? Like, they have so much firepower, and their power plays are just so built and structured well that it shouldn't be a problem. But for some reason, the last month it has been, and it's a little scary, especially just considering, and you've watched hockey long enough, that special teams in the playoffs can win you a series or lose you a series. So I'm really hoping that this power play does the first thing, win you a series, and not the last thing and lose you a series.
I'm really glad you mentioned something there about Austin Matthews, and that's his leadership and his ability to maybe help push this team emotionally forward. I don't think he gets credit for that part of his and so I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays in the playoffs. And my last thought on the Leafs will be Zach Hyman doesn't get enough credit for the job that he does. For me, he fits that category of one of the most forwards in the league, and that's not even a question for me. So let's move on to the other series. His counterpart to Austin Matthews is the talk of Connor McDavid. So I want Connor McDavid talk as I can get on this episode of the show, because you could talk about him for hours and how great that guy is. But outside of Connor McDavid, do the Oilers have enough to push themselves past the Winnipeg Jets?
The Jets, yeah. I think that I have a feeling that I think we're going to get surprised with that series, in the sense that it might be over sooner than we might think. I don't think the Jets did enough at the trade deadline to really bolster their defensive group. And it doesn't seem like a lot of the forwards are clicking, especially with Nick Ehlers out of the lineup. And who knows what his health status is truly going to be. They might bring him back, but who knows if he's actually 100% there. So I don't know. I had the Jets before the trade deadline. I thought the Jets could be the best team in Canada. But I don't think they added enough at the deadline to really make me feel good about that. And they've been playing so badly lately. And I know when the playoffs start up, everything switches into a whole nother gear. But I think Edmonton's got a team that can just kind of blitzkrieg you. And I think it's going to be a situation where it might be too little, too late, very fast. And I think the Oilers can come out, kind of get a quick, maybe 1, 2, 3 game lead. And then at that point, the Jets are not going to have a chance. So I'm thinking the Oilers might end that one quicker than some of the pundits are saying. I think it could be a five game series with Connor Hellebuyck maybe stealing a game, because I think he's going to be the X factor. If Connor Hellebuyck comes out and plays the way we all know he can, who knows? It could be a totally different series. But I think the Oilers do have enough to take the Jets for sure. When it gets to the second round, depending on who they face, I'm going to hope it's the Leafs, fingers crossed. But we'll see what happens then. But I definitely think that they can handle the Jets, and I think it'll be quicker than we think.
So look at the job that the Oilers have done this season and the season they've undergone. Does Dave Tippett get enough credit for the job that he is actually doing in your eyes?
I don't think so. And if you ask Rod that question, he'll tell you he's got a personal connection to the Tippett family. But Dave has come in and he's really changed the entire culture of that team, I believe. And, he might not be the easiest coach to play for, but I think they kind of needed that. I've heard a lot of bad things about the Oilers organization over the years, unfortunately, through the Taylor Hall years and the Eberle years, the Andrew Ference years. It seemed like didn't matter who you brought in or which coach was behind the bench. Nothing good would have happened there during those years. And I think Tippett's brought in a sense of stability. Ken Holland has come in with a sense of, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but he just has this established sense of stableness. And I think it's just brought a whole level of, I'm going to say a little bit of calmness to that team and on the ice. And I just with the star power that they have, any given night could be a 4 or 5 point night for Connor McDavid. So I think that's largely in part to Dave Tippett coming in, and he's really grown Darnell Nurse's game. We've seen Adam Larson kind of come back into what they thought they were getting when they traded for him. And I think that the younger guys are coming up as well too. They need to get more out of their depth, and I don't know how Tippett can go about doing that, because if you look at their stat sheet, it's 100 points, it's like 80 some points, and then it's 40, and then it's 30, and then nobody has like more than 20. It's really top heavy, but you can still win with that. It's just a matter of maybe getting the right secondary scoring at the right time. And I'm very curious to see how Tippett handles it. I think it's going to be one of the more interesting storylines in this offseason, or this postseason, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Connor Hellebuyck. Now he could be the X factor for the Winnipeg Jets. Mike Smith is the same thing for the Oilers. But you ask people who they rather have, and you're probably going to get 99% of people saying Connor Hellebuyck. But I don't think there's a goaltender in the North Division right now playing better than Mike Smith is for the Oilers. Is there an advantage in goal at all either way for you, or is this just a straight shot?
Well, funny you ask. We talked to Eddie Lack last week on Rod's show, and Eddie played with Mike Smith a little bit, and he basically said, like, Mike Smith is an animal, and especially when it gets to playoffs, he's always able to find a whole different gear, a whole nother level. You saw it a couple years ago in Calgary. I feel like he had a really good series against the Avalanche, even though they got swept, right? That's what happened, right? They got swept. But he wasn't
in 5.
Yeah, he in 5. So he wasn't the problem from everything I saw. And you think back to that era, that magical Phoenix. It wasn't Arizona at the time. It was still Phoenix Coyotes. That magical run that they had back in whatever year that was. And that was all him. Like, they weren't a good hockey team, and he took them as far as they went. So I do believe that, a hot goalie can win you a series. A good power play can win you a series. So the two of those together, I think Edmonton can do both of those things. So who knows? They could go super far in this playoffs. But with Mike Smith and Connor Hellebuyck and specifically, I don't think there's an advantage necessarily either way, because of the ability that Mike Smith has to turn it on. With Connor Hellebuyck, it's just going to all depend on the team in front of him. Like, I feel like that's kind of the biggest thing, but he still has that ability to turn on God mode just like that too. Like, I saw it several times with the Leafs this year, and it's just like, how are we not scoring on this guy? I don't get it. And so it could definitely go either way, but I do think that if you're going to get into the conversation of who would you rather have, I think Mike Smith has a great argument for when it comes to the playoffs. You might actually start picking him over Connor Hellebuyck for a one-off. Like, I wouldn't do it long term, but for a one-off, Mike Smith is a decent little option.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I think I'd take him right now in this moment over Hellebuyck, and you don't get to say that very often when it comes to a Mike Smith conversation. Let's go to Winnipeg quickly for a second here. The preseason predictions a lot of people had them as one of the top 2 in the division, one of the top 3 in the division. I didn't. I float my boat a little bit there. I had them further down. It looked really good for a long time there, and then it just seemed to fall off a cliff. In your minds, why did Winnipeg just fall off the cliff like they did? And what do you see with that Jets team right now? And can they rectify that to actually have a chance in this series versus the Oilers?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The whole drama with the Patrick Laine thing early in the year really shook things up there, I think. And then they traded him, and they didn't have Dubois for 2 weeks, and they seem to actually do kind of okay. But for the most of the season, like, I think a lot of us agreed, and we talked about it on the Squadcast quite a bit, but they just didn't have enough defensive prowess I'm talking blue line specifically. But I think overall team defense too, they struggled with at times. And Connor Hellebuyck can only do so much. He's only so good. Like, so I think overall, I think they just lacked a lot of cohesion at some points of the year, and it just seemed like they were scrambly at times. From what I saw, I'm no Winnipeg Jets expert, so to speak, but from what I saw, it just seemed like there were some nights where none of them seemed to be on the same page. And they got down quick some nights, and it just was over. And I don't know. I think that's mostly it. I think their locker room just got shaken up this year a little bit. And it just kind of, like I said earlier, just once stuff started to snowball this year, it just didn't seem like teams were really able to get out of those situations. And I think they definitely fell fell victim to that at a couple of different points in the season. Because like you said, early on, I could have told you, and I said it on my show too, I really thought they had a chance to be the best team in Canada and come out of the North Division. But everything stopped kind of going their way. And Connor Hellebuck stopped having as many God nights as he was having early on. And they just didn't seem to have what it took to kind of win games. And that's kind of all it was. And, I wouldn't be surprised if you see changes in the Jets this offseason. I think Paul Maurice is a great coach, but just the way things went this year and with the rumblings around from what I've been hearing, they might look at making some changes and maybe some player personnel changes as well. So it could be a very interesting summer in Winnipeg, especially if they do get bounced in this first round. Who knows? Pretty much anything's on the table, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you mentioned Paul Maurice there because that leads me right perfectly into what I was going to talk about next. I praised Paul Maurice for the last couple of years here. He had a hard time after Trouba left in that summer. The mass exit on his back, and he had that team working as a good, cohesive group. He had a weird six on the blue line, but yet they still were tremendous for him for a long time. Has he maybe lost his room or lost step there in your eyes, or is this just a one-off where it's just too much in one season?
I want to say it's a one-off. I don't think Paul Maurice is a guy who needs to get fired this summer. It doesn't strike me as that situation. But I think, again, it's just kind of a weird year because with all the COVID restrictions going on, like I heard an interview early in the season it was after Sid Sixero left, so it was on Tim and Friends. And it was Ken Reed was co-hosting, and they had Max Domi on. And Max Domi was having a really tough start to the year with the Blue Jackets. And they asked him, like, you just got traded. You're having a bit of a rough start to your season. How hard is it for you as a new player on that team to kind of, figure it out? And his answer actually told me a lot. And he basically said that, the team can't do anything. They can't bond. There's no bonding situations this year. There's no way to work things out because you have to go to the rink. You have to stay separated from everybody. You can't hang out afterwards. You can't go for a beer. You can't do a bunch of team meetings. So, in most years, you would see, the players only meetings that everybody talks about, or, the coach tearing a strip off of a team after a game, or, you see, it's funny. Sometimes you'll see a team have a rough couple of games, and then you'll see them have an absolutely terrible game. There's a decent chance that they all went out and got super drunk the night before and just tried to work out a few of their problems. Come out, play a hungover game, but it's a team bonding thing. And then they go on a bit of a stretch where they win a bunch of games. So that's not possible this year. That's against the rules. So that's why I keep saying, when stuff started to snowball, it seemed like teams couldn't get out of the way of that because there's no way. The typical way was to just kind of bond it out and have a team meeting or talk about it, but they weren't really allowed to do that. So I feel like it was just a hard year, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of it, for teams to really work things out. And I think the Jets really just kind of happened to them. And I don't think it means that Paul Maurice needs to get fired. I can see it happening, but I hope it doesn't. Because I don't think he's done yet. And I hope the Jets can come out of this. Like I said, if they were in the Central Division this year in a normal year, I still think they're a playoff team. So I think they need to be giving Paul Maurice at least another year in a normal scenario and not have a knee-jerk reaction after this type of year.
I loved your answer there. I listened to a lot of, and this is why, I listened to a lot of the Fan 960 in Calgary, and Rhett Warner is one of the guys in the morning on that show, and he talks about that exact same thing a couple of times this year where he used to go out after a really terrible game or a guy would veteran take him out after really good, and they would get plowed, and they'd play what he called guilty the next night, and they would go out and have one of the best games they had of the season. So, yeah, I think there's a real thing behind that, what you just said there, and I fully like that. And I appreciate the honesty of a guy like Rhett Warner. He's like, yeah, we went and did all these kind of things as a team and for nothing else to get us back to the right mindset. So whatever it takes to win the game. So I love that answer. And I love that it coincides with what I've heard from NHL hockey players as well. It's pretty neat there.
Yeah.
That's the story in the Northern Division.
I don't think alcohol is always the answer. But I just think in some situations,
of course,
I think it helps a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, he would talk about going out and hitting a buffet. He'd go out and big steaks or whatever it was to get those guys back in the mind frame. So just awesome that those stories come out after these guys retire and you hear that, and things we don't think about as a normal hockey fan, and things that you hear about after these guys retire. So awesome, good conversation on the playoff picture around the North Division. Let's talk about a little bit of the rest of the playoffs that have already started in the United States. Some of these series have already gotten going by the time this airs. Some of these series will be four games deep. Or for me, the highlight of the first weekend of NHL playoff action was the Battle of Florida. So I want to start there. First off, did you see the game, and what did you make of that battle that we saw at the start of that playoff series?
So I was like the only person who didn't see that game, but I have a reason. So we were out at the lake all day with me and my wife and the two kids. We were out at the lake, and then nice. When I got back, me and Max, my co-host for the Squadcast, we actually hosted a playoff preview show. And where I had my setup, I didn't have a TV to turn the game on and watch it. Max was giving me basically play-by-play because he had it on beside him. So the whole time he's like, yeah, another fight. There's another fight. Oh, Tampa just scored. Oh, there's another fight. Oh, Florida just scored. So I basically got the play-by-play the whole time. But yeah, we were doing a show during that game, so I missed the actual game. But I just love everything that went on in that game. And I love the fact that it's Florida and Tampa, and that rivalry is finally actually happening. Because for years, I mean, it's it's the most natural rivalry in the States, it feels like. They're both from Florida. They're the only two Florida teams. They should hate each other, but it seemed like that never was really there. So it's for them to all of a sudden just hate each other. I think it's great for hockey, especially down south, but it's great for the sport in general. So for them to come out and have basically the best game that a lot of hockey fans have seen in years is a great start to the playoffs. But, I mean, you look around, every game has a storyline or something going on. I love what happened in the Capitals' first game against the Bruins with Craig Anderson and Tom Wilson scoring the first goal. I mean, that's exciting and fun, and there's so much there. The Wild sneaking on past the Golden Knights in Game 1. That is something I didn't see it coming. A great game. Cam Talbot looks like he has something to prove. And the Islanders getting past the Penguins in Game 1, again, kind of an upset. But in reality, they're pretty even. Like, they were only 6 points apart in the standings or whatever it was. So I think the Islanders have a lot to prove too, because I think a lot of people are writing them off. So I just love so many of the matchups. There's so many storylines to go around, and we only have four of the series started so far at this point. So I think we got a long way to go. This is going to be a great playoff run.
Let's you mentioned New York and Pittsburgh, so let's pivot a little bit that direction, because there's one guy I want to focus on, and yes, he's the easy guy to pick on when you talk about the Pittsburghs. For me, Sidney Crosby had a heart-type season. The way Pittsburgh through that season with all those injuries they had. They win the division. Now they get a host of playoff series, and he was a man on a mission Game 1. He didn't win the game, but he was tremendous. What have you made of the Penguins so far this season and into the playoffs here?
Well, anytime you fire your general manager quits mid-season and you bring in a whole new management staff, and there's talks in the media about a complete teardown rebuild, and that this team is done, and that they're going to trade Sidney Crosby and Malkin and Letang. And that was legitimate conversation for a couple of weeks. And anytime that happens, and then they turn it on the way that they did, and end up finishing in first place in the division, and Brian Burke and Ron Hextall come in, and they seem to kind of stabilize everything after it seemed pretty chaotic there for a little bit. I think that's awesome. I love that. And I think the fact that it's the Penguins and it's Sidney Crosby is 100% the reason. I think anytime you have that leadership core that they have, and then you add a guy like Jeff Carter to come into that, it's the perfect scenario for a guy like Jeff Carter to come in and just kind of fill a role. It doesn't even have to be a primary role, but he's had so much experience in his career, and he's played big roles. He's played small roles. So I think he's kind of like the perfect fit, and I think it sparked the Penguins even more than they already were, especially given Carter and Crosby are probably buddies. They've played on Team Canada lots, Letang, etc. So I think it sparked them so much from basically being down and out to having this great kind of comeback run. It's such a good momentum builder for them, and that's It didn't surprise me at all, but I was really looking forward to a complete strip down of the Pittsburgh Penguins too. I kind of still hope that happens at some point. I think for the entire league, I would love to see a Sidney Crosby trade and what that would look like, or an Evgeny Malkin trade and what that would look like. And I think it would shake up the league so much that it would just be a lot of fun. But until then, it's going to be the Penguins. They're always going to be so competitive, regardless of how bad they've been doing or whatever. I mean, they basically won a Stanley Cup with Ron Hainsey as their only good defenseman. So that if they can do that, they can do pretty much anything. So I wouldn't put anything past those guys.
Sounded like an answer from a Capitals or a Flyers fan there. That's perfect. I loved it. We're up against it here. So only a last one here for me, though, is you look at all the playoff series, take your leaf out of it. Which series are you most looking forward to watching the full 7 games of?
I think it's got to be Tampa Panthers, especially because I missed the first game. So now I'm really intrigued and I want to watch game 2. So that's going to happen, I think, tomorrow. So that's going to be Tuesday. So I'm going to sit down and watch that one. I know it's going to probably bump up against our live Squadcast episode. So we're going to have to figure out that. But so that's me and Max are already talking like, should we cancel if we have a game? I'm like, we're always going to have a game. So there's always going to be a game happening. We just have to deal with it during a Tuesday night show during primetime hours, essentially. So that's just one thing that we've come to accept, that we're going to probably miss a couple of big events, but we're working through it. But I think Tampa and Florida is just so intriguing. But another one that I just kind of want to see what happens is Nashville and Carolina. Now, my co-host is Max. He's a massive Predators fan. And just because of him, I've been following the Predators more this season than I typically would ever have done. And just the way that they got into the playoffs and the way they were able to just basically handle their own destiny and go on a massive winning streak in order to do it. I have a feeling that there could be some magic there, even though it's against Carolina. I'm curious to see that series and just how it goes. If Carolina comes out and sweeps them and just kind of ends everything, or if Nashville has a little bit of magic in the tank and maybe they do go on a magical playoff run and maybe they're that magic 8 seed that we see usually happen every year. Maybe that's it. So I'm going to keep my eye on that Predators Hurricanes as well. So basically the entire Central Division. How's that?
Both good matchups. The one thing about the Predators, I want to see how Saros responds to some of the pressure. I'm a big fan of him in goal there, so I wonder how that's going to work out for him. It's perfect. Clark, this has been amazing. This has been a really good chat. This has been a really quick hour as well. We got through a third of my notes, so we're going to have to do this again sometime, maybe the playoffs here. I appreciate your time for joining me today. Yeah, no problem. That's not surprising to me. If you ask my co-host, Max, he usually makes fun of how long our episodes usually end up going when we do stuff. So not surprising, but hey, I'm available. Hit me up anytime you want. Well, I had Peter Lombardius on one of my earliest podcasts, and he gave me the best piece of advice after on the show. He's like, if you prepare and you've only gone through half your notes, you've had a good show. If you run out of material, then you need to start preparing even better. So really appreciate what Peter said to me there. So I always try to over prepare now, like he put in my mindset. So I appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate the conversation. Definitely leave it to Peter to have that advice, because he's a guy that if you have 20 minutes, you usually don't have enough time. So I've had a few chats with Peter as well, and every time I talk to that guy, it's a great time. So I totally can agree and understand where that came from. Perfect. Thanks so much for your time today, Producer Clark. All right. And thank you, listeners and watchers, for tuning into another episode of the Double Digit Hockey Show on ASTV Productions. I appreciate all the support. Don't forget to find me on social media at Double Digit Hockey. We'll see you guys next time on another edition of the show. Have a good day.